we are going to apply our background knowledge, surrounding words, and picture clues to help us determine the meaning of unknown words. We're going to begin today by reviewing some important vocabulary. The first word is colonies. Colonies are small communities and towns that people made. I want you to say the word, the definition, and do the motions with me. Are you ready? Colonies. Colonies are small communities and towns that people made. So after the Pilgrims came over on their ship called the Mayflower, more immigrants came from England and came into this land. You can see right here on the pictures that they started to land on the east coast of our country. This is where they came to live. They started building communities that we call colonies. Here's a picture of what it might have looked like when more immigrants started to move to our country. There were only Native Americans here. There weren't buildings, there weren't schools, there weren't stores. It was just land. So the people who moved here started building their own communities. You can see in the picture that there's ships that they were coming over on, and they started to build little homes for them to live in. Our next word is establish. I want you to say the word, the definition, and do the motions with me. Ready? Establish. Establish means to create, build, and make permanent. When our immigrants moved here, they tried to establish a home. Our example sentence says, it was not easy for the colonists to establish communities with their own rules, homes, jobs, and food. They had to work hard to build a community that we call colonies and to make it strong, to make it permanent. They had to figure out, what are the rules in our community? How are we going to work together? What jobs can we have? What food are we going to eat? Where are we going to sleep? They had to establish their community. Our next word is founders. I want you to say the word, say the definition, and do the motions with me. Are you ready? Founders. Founders are people who started something first. So immigrants moved here on boats. They started building colonies to live in. They were establishing their own community. And we call them founders. They were some of the first people here who were different than the Native Americans. Our next word is colonists. Are you ready? Colonists. Colonists were the people who made the colonies. See how these words are so similar? Colonies and colonists, they're so similar. Colonies is the name of the community. A colonist is a person. It's the people who were there. So the Pilgrims were some of the first people. After the Pilgrims, more and more immigrants moved to this land, and we call them colonists. They established their own communities. They had to plant food to eat. They had to build homes. They had to work the land. We call these people colonists. They made the colonies. Our next word is settlers. I want you to say the word, read the definition, and do the motions with me. Are you ready? Settlers. Settlers were the people who moved to a new land and lived there. Settlers were the people who moved to a new land and lived there. Colonists made their own communities. Settlers, we use that word to describe people who move and create a new place to live. They settle in a new place. So our example sentence says, settlers are like colonists because they started their own communities. A lot of these words are very similar, boys and girls, and we're going to keep practicing them as we learn today. This video will teach us all about what happened after the Pilgrims came on the Mayflower.
We just had the most amazing family vacation. Let's go! Oh my God!
Welcome to Kids Academy.
Hello. Let's get started on the lesson. Jamestown was the first English settlement in North America. A settlement is a colony or a small community of people. English settlers began their journey from London in December of 1606. They traveled aboard 3 ships: Discovery, Susan Constant, and Godspeed. The Discovery was the smallest ship, while the Susan Constant was the largest. These ships carried nearly 150 people on a voyage to North America. A voyage is a long trip taken by sea or air. The English settlers were in search of new land. First, they stopped at the Canary Islands for water and rest. They also made a stop at the Caribbean islands. Finally, after 4 long months, they reached America in April of 1607. They would soon begin to explore land in Virginia. Jamestown was the perfect location for a new settlement. It was surrounded by water, which made it easy to escape from attacks by boat. The area was also uninhabited, which means that no one lived there. While Native Americans lived in nearby areas, Jamestown was free to colonize. The settlers' long voyage had finally come to an end. Let's review. Jamestown was the first English settlement in North America.
Okay, so we have just learned a little bit more about after the Pilgrims, who were the people who started moving and immigrating to our country. Just like the Pilgrims, many of them came on ships or boats. And when they got here, they decided to settle. They decided it was time for them to start building colonies. There were 13 colonies that were built a long, long time ago, and that is how our country started. Today, we're going to continue with this knowledge as we study context clues. We're going to watch one more video about the 13 colonies that were created after immigrants moved to our country. Thanks for being patient, boys and girls. Here we go.
Today we're learning about the 13 colonies. A colony is an area settled by a group of people outside their country. Who established colonies in North America? European explorers first started sailing to North America around the year 1000. About 500 years later, Christopher Columbus landed in the New World. Soon, people from England, Spain, France, and other countries began making claims to the land and settling in North America. People were already living in the area, and many were killed by settlers. Others died of diseases that were spread from the settlers. Still others were forced into slavery or forced to move off their land. One of the earliest settlements was established by the Spanish in 1565 in St. Augustine, which is now part of Florida. In 1607, English settlers founded Jamestown, which is now part of Virginia. The settlers had moved there to gain more land and wealth and have a better life. In 1620, the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth, which is now part of Massachusetts. They'd moved because they wanted freedom to practice their own religion. Over the next 100 years, European settlers founded colonies all around the east coast of North America. What were the 13 colonies? The 13 colonies were English territories established during the 1600s and early 1700s. They were Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The 13 colonies were ruled by the King of Great Britain. The colonists kept ties to England, but adapted to a new way of life. Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island were the New England colonies. New England colonists grew crops and fished to feed their families and use for trade. Many New England merchants brought goods over from England to trade with other colonists, so ports around New England became busy centers of trade. The meeting house was the focus of many New England communities, and it was used for business, religious services, and town meetings. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware were the middle colonies. Many colonists farmed wheat and other grains and traded with people all over the colonies. In fact, the middle colonies were known as the bread colonies. People in the middle colonies also built factories to produce iron, paper, and also textiles or cloth. Many people in the middle colonies came from different European countries and practiced different religions. So the culture of the middle colonies included a mix of different traditions. Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia were the southern colonies. The soil in the southern colonies was good for farming, and many colonists ran plantations. They grew crops like sugarcane, rice, cotton, and tobacco. African slaves were brought over in the early 1600s, and plantations relied heavily on them. In the 1700s, African slaves made up almost half the population of the southern colonies. Slavery wasn't abolished until 1865, well after the United States of America was established. How did the colonies become the United States of America? The colonists had to pay taxes to the British government, and they did not get to choose their leaders. The colonists decided to separate from Great Britain and establish their own independent government. In 1775, fighting broke out between the colonists and British soldiers, and the American Revolution began. The war finally ended in 1781. Later, in 1787, the Constitution of the United States was written and signed. The 13 colonies became the first 13 states of the United States of America. Where are you going, Moby? You're going to start a new colony.
Okay, so we have heard more details about what happened when people from England immigrated to this new land. They started building colonies. They started establishing their own communities. And we learned that there were 13 colonies at the beginning of our country. Today, we're going to read a book about the American colonies and what it was like to live there. We're going to listen to this example from Mr. McKinney about what we're going to do with context clues today. Mr. McKinney read our book, and he's going to show us what we're going to do with some details from our text today.
Today we are going to be talking about context clues. And I want you to try to figure out the meaning of these unknown words and split them up into two different categories. Does each word talk about food or hygiene? Hygiene is just your overall health, how well you take care of yourself, how well you brush your teeth, wash your hands, and things like that. So let's look at the first word, knits. I'm not sure if knits should belong to food or hygiene. Maybe you remember, but it's also okay to go back in the story to find even greater context. Here's the page where it talks about knits. It is on page 24. Here's what it says. Most colonists had dirty hands, muddy feet, and greasy hair. Itchy lice and nits lived in their hair. So nits must mean something similar to lice. So that tells me it has to do with your hygiene. It is not a food. Rarely bathed. Do you think this would be in the context of food or hygiene? Hygiene would be correct. Smelled bad. Now this could go either way because food can smell bad, but if we read the context in the story, it's actually talking about people smelled bad. So that would be their hygiene. Now this is a very interesting one, and so is this. The two words are chamber pots and outhouse. On this page, it talks about outhouses. The title of the page says bathrooms. It says an outhouse seat was a board with a hole in the middle. Waste fell into it. Yuck. And down here, it gives the definition of an outhouse, and it says that it serves as a beautiful, wonderful toilet. And then on this page, it says that when an outhouse was difficult to get to, for instance, if it was really cold out or if it was storming outside, they would use a chamber pot. And it says it was dumped out each day. So it must have been a bowl used to go to the bathroom in. Aren't we so thankful that we have indoor bathrooms? So which category do you think chamber pots and outhouse belongs to? I hope chamber pots would not be a food. Do not mistake it as that. They are both hygiene. Wow, we are all on hygiene. We have 0 food so far. Let's see what the next one is. Hardtack. What is hardtack? Well, if we look on page 10, it says, Colonists' only bread was hardtack, a rock-hard cracker. There's also a picture of it right here. So hardtack must mean food. Rotten, in the context of the story, it talked about rotten food. Moldy would talk about food. Dried fruit. Do you think dried fruit would be talked about in the context of food or hygiene? Food would be correct. Vegetables. Do you think vegetables would be in the context of food or hygiene? Food. And let's say you don't know what that word says. You come along that word and you're not sure how to pronounce it. Well, if the context of the page is talking about food, then this must mean a type of food. And last but not least, dirty hands. Do you think dirty hands would be talked about in the context of food or hygiene? Hygiene is correct.
Okay, so we have just seen an example from Mr. McKinney. After he read our text today, he sorted words into 2 categories, food and our hygiene, how we stay clean. Today we're going to do the same thing, but first we need to find our text together. Today you get to read the same book that Mr. McKinney read. It's all about what it was like to live in the colonies with the colonist people. So we're going to practice finding our text together. First, you need to go to Seesaw, click on Activities, Read ELA, and the title of today's task is American Colonies. The first thing we're going to do is find our text together. Our text is on Mayan. It's called Gross Facts About the American Colony. Today we're going to watch a video to see how to get to that text. This is a quick video to help you find our text in our project on Mayan. Today we have a new project called Colonies. You can see that we have it right here on the front when you open to Mayan. You can also click projects up at the top. When you click projects, you will see a new project called Colonies. And inside is our text called Gross Facts About the American Colonies. Today, your independent work is to 1, listen to this text on Mayan and learn all about what it was like to live in the colonies as a colonist. Remember, they were the founders. They were the first people to start establishing communities here. When you are done, you have 3 slides to complete. Slide 2 asks you to share one thing you think would be difficult about being a colonist. You can type your response or record your response. Next, you're going to share what you found to be the most interesting. What's something interesting about living in the colonies? Your next task on slide 4 is just what Mr. McKinney did. You are going to sort these words into 2 categories. Our categories are sickness or shelter. There are lots of words on here that you may not know. You can go back to your text on Mayan, use your context clues to help you determine, is each word talking about being sick or a type of shelter? Those are your tasks today. When you are done completely with your slides, you will push the green check and turn in.